it's like this avalanche, Jason, of data and reevaluating reality, where you realize a lot of these phenomena, just like UFO, UAPs, Congress is discovering, there could be a lot of subjects that we were not told about in our educational systems that actually turn out to be real. And the professionals and the people that we trusted weren't really doing their jobs as well as they could have, or might have been lying.
This is a wildly complex and interesting topic. And so when we spoke last week, I was trying to figure out, like, how do we do this? Like, would you like to do a presentation or whatever? And then I was like, I can ask a million questions about almost anything. And so we were like, let's do that.
I could tell.
Yeah. So how did you so you're a doctor, you have a PhD in what?
Yes. Well, a girlfriend I used to know said it was in post hole digging. I dug a lot of post holes for her out at her place.
Fun fact, my first job ever was I painted posts, not the signs. I worked for a place called The Signpost, and I am highly trained in digging post holes all over Northern Virginia.
There you go. We have a lot in common around. Yes. So actually, my PhD is in sociology, which, sociology is part of social science, study of society and institutions and beliefs and all those good things. And I specialized in research methods, and I was eventually an assistant professor teaching statistics at WSU in Pullman, Washington, where we filmed part of Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot.
And then there was something related to fractals.
Yeah, getting right into it. I mean, social science and sociology are based on these assumptions about how you can make sense of reality that are highly questionable. The idea that things fit linear relationships, that we're dealing with these closed systems, that you can approximate this complex reality we live in onto a line. And so right away, when I started, getting involved with this degree program, 7 years to get my PhD in my case, I could see there was something not quite right with the mathematical assumptions about the nature of the reality we lived in. It was just overly geared towards this idea of normality. Right. And there's been a lot of criticism of the founders of statistics that it was focused on the idea of the average person. Back then, it would have been the average man, as if such a thing really exists. Right. And so you're constantly compressing reality into this box, averaging things out. But as you all know, the way your life is, the way reality is, things don't always go along according to an average. So when another graduate student introduced me to this idea of fractal geometry and its kind of sister discipline, chaos theory, my eyes were already open for other methodologies that might fit the way nature really works and reality works without trying to make things look so ordinary and linear. Yeah. Fractals are the study of branching fractured structures like trees and bronchial system, and cardiovascular system, things that are constantly branching out. The way nature fits a lot of volume into a fixed space. It was kind of invented by someone named Benoit Mandelbrot, a French-American mathematician working for IBM in Armonk, New York. Oh, wow. And he discovered there were a lot of patterns that have some sort
What
of
era is this? Like, when was he?
This would have been in the 1980s and 90s.
I just want to know, is he wearing like wire rim glasses and short shorts as he's coming up with these theories? Yeah, I think the answer is yes.
I don't know if he wore glasses, but you can look him up. But this idea of fractals, self-similar structures, things that look the same at any scale. When this was discovered 100 years ago by mathematicians in Europe, they were called mathematical monsters. And they wanted to keep them in the closet because you're looking at structures that never resolve to a line. They never resolve to ordinary Euclidean shapes that we were taught in school, based on the way the Greeks thought about reality, that things should fit ordinary, even-looking shapes, like circles and squares and pentagons and things like this. So what these mathematicians found is there is a whole class of objects that never resolve to lines, and they look the same at any scale. And this became the basis for cell phone antennas, which have a lot of these repeating patterns at smaller scales because you can pick up different bandwidths. JPEG algorithms that were, one of the first compression algorithms for graphics on computers. Because you can get more data through in just a limited amount of data, but reproduce it at the other end without having to use a lot of bandwidth. So there's some practical applications for this, but it turns out that this is how nature really designs reality. Just if you look at how your body's constructed, you look at mountain ranges and clouds and rivers, the way they branch off. So the important point about this, the take-home message, is that we've been imposing a certain view of reality onto nature, which may not be how it really works. So hence, it may not be surprising that there are phenomena out there that don't fit into that scientific model that science has chosen to ignore just because it's not easy to deal with.
Got it. And then what was from that, so you got your PhD, right? And then what was your transition into, I'm going to say, this realm?
Well, this is really an interesting story because in my building at Wilson Hall, where you can see in the Flash of Beauty movie, where we filmed some of it right out there, upstairs from the sociology department was the anthropology department, and there was a guy there named Grover Krantz. Grover Krantz was one of the first people to take Bigfoot seriously in the United States academic community, and he paid a heavy price for it, by the way. I didn't know him at the time. Maybe I shared the elevator with him walking down the hall. I had friends who used to hang out with him because he was considered the cool guy, because he studied something called Bigfoot. Back in the 80s, I was so focused on getting my PhD. Any of you been in some sort of professional training program? I was like laser focused on getting it. So I did not branch out from my subjects of fractals at the time and research methods. However, he was very close by, and he was one of the first people, based on the footprints and hair samples and vocalizations and evidence in the Northwest, and especially around the Blue Mountain Range, which is not all that far from Pullman in eastern Washington. I had friends who got these plaster casts from him talking years later. He just had this whole, he pulled open his sock drawer and there were all these plaster casts of huge footprints. So maybe some of it started way back by osmosis from the anthropology department down to the sociology department. I don't know. I remember there was a Bigfoot conference in 1989 at WSU, and it wasn't even on my radar screen. One of the first conferences ever in the US about Bigfoot. There were other researchers, like in Canada, John Bindernagel, and others who at the same time were studying this, but it wasn't part of my world back then. The way this topic came to me, and by the way, I'm actually from New York originally, so I am from this same sort of school system that those of you that grew up on the East Coast are familiar with, which is rigorous and really fact-based, and they don't teach us much about these sort of topics, do they? If the discussion ever comes up, it's like one or two sentences like, it's a hoax or something, and you never talk about it in high school, do you? Right. So the way this subject came out is I eventually moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I came across this subject, and this isn't in the film at all, but I came across a subject called remote viewing, which is this program to train psychic spies that was started by DIA and eventually taken over by CIA during the 70s, like part of the Cold War with the Soviet Union, was to create these psychic spies because the Russians, the Soviets had been doing this. So we felt like we had to catch up to them.
I think at Fort Reno, here in DC, was one of the places that they would actually practice remote viewing. Do you know
Fort
if that's
Meade.
true? Fort Meade?
Yeah, yeah. So there was a cohort of remote viewers over at Fort Meade at NSA headquarters. So remote viewing.
What is a remote viewer?
So what this is the ability to perceive information at a distance, things that are happening in other locations far away from you physically that you're picking up through your intuition, through some sort of other process that modern science is still to this point not totally familiar with. Thanks, good question. So because there were people in the Soviet Union, natural psychics, that were really good at this, our intelligence agencies wanted to see if we could do it here too, and they initially recruited natural psychics, a natural psychic from New York City named Ingo Swann, and some others on the West Coast, Pat Price and others, to see if we could also have people sitting in a room view something that's happening 2,000 miles away without any physical knowledge of what's going on there, and accurately describe what's at the scene, what's going on there, describe what could happen in the future, things like this. And through rigorous testing from DIA and later people at CIA, they determined this was real. And there were people that were naturally good at this. The Soviets had their own natural psychics. You can find books about this, ESP wars, East and West, and other books. Ed May wrote that book. He was one of the directors of the program. In any case, this program became declassified in 1995. It was in operation for 20 years. There were major successes to the program. We can talk about that another time. I found out about it coming out of graduate school in 92. And I'm hearing about this and I'm thinking, is this one of the things that could be based on some sort of fractal mathematics that no one ever told me about that could be real? In other words, I suspected coming out of graduate school that there were things that were real that none of us had been told about because they didn't fit these linear research methods, which to me seemed kind of kindergartenish. And I thought maybe maybe this is one of these things that sort of fit chaos theory, fractal geometry, and I should look into it. So I took a class in a place called Farsight Institute in Atlanta. I ended up teaching there. They just liked having me around because I had a PhD. I was kind of okay at doing the remote viewing. Basically, the way it works is you have a target hidden in a folder. It could be placed back there, and the viewer's asked, describe the location that's indicated by the target. Not just what's in the folder. Send your awareness to that location and describe for us what's happening there or in the past or something like this. And I didn't believe this was possible, but after a week of training, I was definitely getting results, other people in the class, that really showed me, you're drawing very accurate pictures of something you haven't physically seen yet. There must be some subterranean communication mode going on here, some channel that it seems to exist. After all, statisticians were data-based people. You could see the data showing you there's some correlation here, and it's real. So I thought, wow, this is kind of amazing thing to discover. So I started teaching it in Boulder, Colorado, this institute I called the Mount Baldy Institute, named after a mountain in New Mexico outside of Santa Fe. The reason this relates back to this is the natives in Colorado, people who'd spent their whole life in Colorado, over the course of 20 years, told me about their Bigfoot encounters. And then this came out slowly, Jason. Like you go out to lunch, taking breaks or something, and they say, you want to hear something that happened to me? And you would hear these stories. Now, I had heard about Bigfoot. I knew about it because sometime in the 70s, it was shown as the Patterson-Gimlin film, that famous 30-second photo of Patty is the Bigfoot was called in Bluff Creek, California, walking and you see her striding along there. You've seen this, the classic film, still to this day considered, maybe one of the best. It's, filmed on real film, a 16 millimeter film, Patterson and Gimlin and so forth. I had seen this as a trailer to a movie, at a movie my brother took me to when I was like 14. And there was this short little preview filmed in Oregon about Bigfoot. So I was had seen this, but I thought, like maybe many of you thought, or we've been told, if it does exist, it's some sort of rare North American wood ape. Nothing to get too excited about, just some sort of rare ape that, it's rare, so we haven't been told about it. Maybe there's a couple hundred in the Northwest and so forth. That's what my thinking about it, was, if it even was relevant to me. But what the students in my RV classes described was something a little different than that, Jason. Mm-hmm. One woman described this sort of telepathic contact she had. And I listened to this one day. I said, seriously? She said she was outside in the area called the Black Forest, northwest of Colorado Springs, not far from where NORAD is. Yeah. And she said she was upstairs in bed, just going to sleep, and all of a sudden she saw this image of a orange-haired Bigfoot looking right back at her in her mind's eye. And she's upstairs. Yeah. And she hears a scream. So she's not sure if this is in her mind. Her friend was downstairs, a roommate, in the kitchen looking through the French doors and had seen this creature jump up on the deck and had heard this. So they actually literally heard the scream, but my student Barbara said that she had seen it in her mind's eye first, but then the friend saw it through the window. So it was something strange about that. She couldn't have physically seen it, but what she saw in her mind's eye is exactly what her friend saw. Yeah. So that was one encounter. Then another fellow, he was very reluctant to talk about this, told me that he had been camping. He grew up in Fort Collins area, northern Colorado. He went camping by himself in high school, and he was camping by himself in an area called Netherland, which is up in the Front Range, up from Boulder. And something unzipped his tent in the middle of the night and pulled him out of his sleeping bag. He said at jet speed. It was so fast that the G-forces pushed him into the foot of the sleeping bag, and he's 6'4". Oh, wow. And he said it was so terrifying, he never wanted to go back in the woods again without a gun. Yeah. He said he screamed, whatever it was, put him down, and he immediately pops his head out, and there's nothing there. There had been no people in the campsite. There were no cars. And when it ended, there's still nothing there. But he said the speed at which he was pulled out of his tent was just faster. And he's big, faster than. So anyway, these sort of stories started to pile up. So
I'm fascinated by how someone was gets to start telling you that story. Do you know what I mean? Someone, for whatever reason, they feel comfortable enough with you to share, because a lot of people will not tell anyone, or do you have any understanding of why you have created, or what about you reads as safe space to someone that's had these experiences?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because what I found about the whole subject of remote viewing is it's such a strange, freaky topic in and of itself. I mean, the ability to have psychic functioning, to perceive something at a distance, something that most of us weren't taught as real in our science classes anywhere, high school or college. It's the topic itself attracted people to my institute. Oh, yeah. And they felt more comfortable sharing other experiences because they felt that I was someone who was also on the weird enough side to be open-minded to hear their story without laughing at them. Yeah. But this was also true of people that had worked in the government, and many people had worked at NASA. Mm-hmm. We had Mike here last night. And they told me stories of, over these whole decades I've been teaching RV, I had people tell me things that I wouldn't have believed were true. What's really up there on the moon, what the astronauts saw, what NASA knows about, all these types of stories. So the Bigfoot kind of stories fit into this genre of things you might not believe were true unless you heard it from yourself, from someone you really know very well and really trust. Yeah. And that's what got my interest going. And even as recently as 2019, someone asked me to go to a Bigfoot museum in Bailey, Colorado, and I said no. Because even as recently as 2019, that's not that long ago, I still didn't quite see the relevance of it until I visited the Bailey Sasquatch outpost in Bailey, Colorado. And that's where this kind of scales fell from my eyes. You can see, folks, what happens is it takes a while for things that other people are telling you to kind of sink in sometimes, that it matters because of your education, especially someone who's been through
Well, so what I find absolutely fascinating, I grew up with none of this. My dad's a Southern Baptist minister. I did not grow up I grew up in Florida and actually Brevard County, where there is, in the first film, there is several encounters. My uncle had an encounter. He's a truck driver with the skunk ape. But last year, I did an exhibit here with the super on spectrum nonverbal painter. And so I tried to always say, like, with every exhibit I do, I try to take like one life lesson, and I had like 18 at that one. But they turned me on to that podcast, the telepathy tapes. Have you ever listened to this? Yeah. Raise your hand if you ever listened to this podcast, telepathy tapes. So what stunned me listening to that, and it kind of goes to this, is they would do a test where they would take the child that has this special, who cannot speak at all, that usually has one human, usually the mother, that they can communicate with. So then they would put the child, they called it sensory deprivation helmet. They called it something, but it was basically like a mask with something on it on the second floor or the third floor of a house with absolutely no contact whatsoever, and have the mother sit next to a random number generator. Then they would hit the random number. The mother would look at it, and then the child, blindfolded, would write the number out. And it was multiple numbers, like multiple digits, 60 times in a row. And it was 100% accurate every single time. Like, this was one of the most listened to podcasts of last year. So the fact, like, just like you said, that exposed me to something that I was just like, what is happening? This is pretty wild. Having discussions with Charles, with the artist. We had a very protective mother who actually had a very difficult time with me communicating directly with her son. To then this week, like all the things that we've been talking about this week, and now, kind of leading up to our discussion, I feel like I'm having that kind of slow.
So you know what I'm referring to. I don't even know how we describe that.
Yeah,
it's a slow transition from one belief system over here going 180 degrees to saying, oh my God, it's real.
Well, I think it's one of those things of like, you don't really, like you've never really paid attention. Like, for example, I drive a Subaru Outback. Up until I bought a Subaru, I never even saw them on the road. Like, I never looked at them, whatever. Now, like, everyone has a Subaru Outback. But so, I think it's one of those, like, you become familiar and in tune with something, and then you start noticing it a lot more because your consciousness is aware that something is there. And then that could be something is mundane, which is extra mundane, a Subaru Outback, or something as in wild as, telepathy or remote viewing or anything like that.
Yeah. So what happens to us is the data build up in our experience, and we eventually change our points of view and belief systems about things. But it can be a slow process, and it doesn't help to have other people trying to convince you, because you're just going to pull back and be more defensive. You've all been in discussions with people who believe things that you probably don't believe in. And the more they try to convince you, the less likely you are. It's your own personal experience. It can take years.
Yeah.
My mind wasn't even quite open to remote viewing, but I saw the evidence right in front of myself. With Bigfoot, when I went into this museum, which friends had told me I should visit for a while. Even friends gave me Bigfoot socks from the museum, and I still hadn't been there. When I went there was a map of all the sightings and encounters up and down the Front Range, Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins. And that map was filled with circles. There were people that had seen footprints, people that had rocks thrown at them, there was a different colored dot for each type of encounter. People who heard vocalizations, and there was another dot for people that actually had physical sightings. So as someone who had taught statistics, published statistically oriented papers in peer-reviewed journals, here's a whole map. Either it was true or it wasn't, with like 100 dots up and down the Front Range, recent sightings, tree structures. And I said, wow, I had no idea. I heard a couple accounts from my remote viewing students, but here were like 100 little dots. So that meant what we were dealing with is something that in sociology we call hidden events. Things that people are experiencing, but they don't want to talk about for fear of ridicule, ostracism, being laughed at, fear of being negative reactions from their employers and so forth.
Yeah.
And this, I mean, this is matters because in U.S. history, there's all types of hidden events that took decades to come out. I mean, just the one well-known one is child abuse. Child abuse wasn't considered real as a type of diagnosis until around the 1960s, where there were several national meetings of professionals, doctors, law enforcement, child psychologists. They all had to get together and agree this was actually happening, because before that, it was thought that children were falling out of trees. They had thin bone structure, what we call intellectual alibis. They're making up excuses to avoid dealing with the topic.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until like 62 or 65, there was a meeting here in DC, Chicago. That's a hidden event. And that's something we can all understand. But it also has to do with what we call paranormal phenomena. Is it actually the people involved who kind of make judgments about this, who work in the media, people we listen to, whose opinions we respect? You probably all have your favorite, podcasters or people who write op-ed columns in the New York Times or Washington. And you listen to these people. I have a friend who says, I won't believe it till it's on NPR. It's a woman who's a friend, someone in Boulder, she's older than me. She said, her reality is NPR. So we're all kind of like this. We have our sources and there's some comfort level. We don't want to go beyond our comfort zone. So these topics build up. Where you have hidden events, you have hidden history. Yeah. And those pockets of history can remain on the sidelines, hidden away, in their own little mental ghetto.
Yeah.
Until we have films like Flash of Beauty.
Yeah.
Thanks to the Resonance Pro crew, and other people who like you've seen these hearings in Congress recently about UFOs, now relabeled UAP, so it's a little less controversial.
What did it stand for? Unidentified amalogous projectile? Was it projectile?
Yeah, right. Now, Jason, I like UFO. There's nothing wrong with UFO.
No,
it's
UFO
unexplained aerial phenomena, which they felt.
What did I just say?
I think Hillary Clinton. I think Hillary Clinton was the one that proposed that, because she had. Do you know the Clintons had an interest in the UFO subject? She was at Lawrence Rockefeller's event in Wyoming, and there was a meeting held at Bacantico Hills in Westchester, where I'm originally from, with famous UFO people in the 90s.
Oh, wow.
So there have been these meetings of, the heavy hitters, bigwigs, elites in our society to try to understand some of these topics, but they're very challenging because of the way we're brought up as Westerners about what could be real. We're not really brought up to believe in telepathy, and it wasn't very long ago that witches were burnt at the stake in Europe, even in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Yeah. Women were drowned after, if they were accused of being witches. So there are these kind of unconscious motivators for us not to want to break ranks with the tribe about reality, because we're all intuitively afraid that if we go too far beyond the pale, there's going to be some sort of punishment from other members of society. And I think this impacts the Bigfoot subject directly, because now that once I started getting involved, I started going to conferences, I started talking to people. The stuff that people told me, people who said they'd never even mentioned this to other people before, it was just astounding. But here you had witness after witness, some of the types of things you heard in the movie last night. The same sort of things, the telepathic mind speak, transparency, seeing these creatures, and then they became like the Predator type effect, from the Predator movies. Remember those? Yeah. And invisibility, gifting, things showing up inside locked homes and trailers that were unexpected. And I began, it's like this avalanche, Jason, of data and reevaluating reality, where you realize a lot of these phenomena, just like UFO, UAPs, Congress is discovering, there could be a lot of subjects that we were not told about in our educational systems that actually turn out to be real. And the professionals and the people that we trusted weren't really doing their jobs as well as they could have, or might have been lying.
One of the things last night when we were setting up, this was very interesting. So part of, we did the film screening last night, but this talk is next to or isolated from, it's not you don't have to have seen the film. But one of the things that I thought was super interesting was, so this photo, and I have it, the lights are off of it, is that a screen? Is that an isolated shot from the film? Is that a still from the film of an actual gifting experience? And I brought it up to Simeon, and you said you're still new to that topic, or something along those lines.
Yeah, relatively new.
Yeah, but hearing that you were new to that topic was really interesting to me as well. So can you kind of tell us a little bit, or one of you guys can too, like a little bit about what does that even mean?
Right.
It's actually interaction between like a Bigfoot and humans.
Yeah, the gift. So the witnesses you encounter, witnesses to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Skookum, whatever. There are hundreds of names, by the way, in Native American tribes, even tribes that didn't talk to each other for Bigfoot. Just hundreds of different names for this creature. Various tribes had relationships with them, and modern people like us have relationships. I've spoken to people I know who leave objects out for them, things they think that the creatures will like.
Yeah.
Things like jars of peanut butter, as you saw in the movie, apples. You saw that guy Jack leaving an apple. Yeah. It can be unhealthy treats from the supermarket, probably processed sugars, and things are probably not good for them. But people leave those sorts of things too. And in return, what they find sometimes, as you saw in the movie last night, Paranormal Bigfoot, other objects are left in the place of those conventional things that we leave that they like. So people develop a relationship with them. And I have found that these people generally don't like to talk about their relationship with these creatures because they feel like it's really special. Like if you live in an area where you can leave things for deer or raccoon or something like this, it begins to feel kind of special because you have a relationship with the wildlife, right? But this is taking it to a whole nother level because these are bipedal intelligent creatures. And they leave intelligent things. Like you can see in the picture, they rearrange puzzles. They leave crystals. One of their favorite things apparently is to leave mummified mice braided in grass, which for them is really special. We might have.
It feels special.
It just feels special to have a mummified mouse braided in grass. But the thing about some of these things are things that would be very hard for you to make if you look at the braiding and so forth. So it's an aspect of it. Now, I've talked to people who have said their entire fruit trees have been stripped bare overnight, which wasn't something they really wanted to happen just before they picked them. Right. That's kind of like an inverse gifting. Right. But this is a part of the whole phenomena, is a relationship. So people feel that this is so special that they really don't want very many people to know about this, because it's not just like having a relationship with a particular deer or other wildlife in your backyard in the suburbs or more. This is like something that's intelligent that you almost feel is protecting the neighborhood. And you look at some of the Native American traditions about Sasquatch, they feel that this is a protector of the forest, something, to honor, to just kind of let alone. So that's the gifting, is that sort of relationship. Again, to our modern minds, it almost seems inconceivable that there's something intelligent living out there in the woods that can leave intelligently rearrange cubes like we saw in the movie to spell out your name and things like that.
One of the things, so the crew in the back has made two films related to Bigfoot. In the first film, what really struck me is there was an interviewee, there was a subject on camera who was married to a Native American woman who would not go on camera. And the woman was shocked. She did not meet anyone. All of the humans that she interacted with until she was 19 1000% believed in Bigfoot, and their whole families, everyone has this history of interacting with him. So she didn't meet people until she was in college. Am I getting this correct? Until she was in college that didn't believe. And so she was like, what do you mean? And like having, like, that is not, that level, and faith is not even, that level of experience is really intense. That's like growing up anywhere and having like a very, very visceral, like, let's just use, your, like, my grandfather was a magician. He was a professional magician, right? Like, I grew up around magic and all these types of things, but it is kind of rare to have that in your family. And so I grew up around, he had his room of magic tricks and all these types of things. And then something's coming out of somewhere all the time. A rope's coming in, like all these kind of things that we're kind of that I grew up used to. And then you get a friend over, say, dude, your grandfather's crazy. And so just what we grow up with and what we're used to, when it gets into something that is, I'm going to say, esoteric, and you're informed that one of the things in these films and in the books and all these kind of things that really hit me is that there's usually kind of this repeated phrase of, I know what I'm seeing, but I know it doesn't exist, but I'm staring right at it and it exists. And so there's a verse in the Bible. As I said, I grew up. My favorite little verse, I believe, help me with my disbelief. It's like one of the most powerful verses, I believe, in the New Testament. It's kind of the way I am about almost everything. I believe, help me with my disbelief. And so talks like this, films like this, all of these things that are not mainstream, like you said, is kind of building this body of understanding to the point that we've had two polar opposite presidents in the last 2 weeks agree, like voice on the news, like Trump and Obama, that they both believe in aliens, and then they walked it back. Like, that's wild.
Yeah, and Jason, there's well, just talking about my own family history. Okay, so my father's family emigrated from Nazi Germany. I had a chance to talk to my grandmother to do an oral history project in the 70s about what it was like as a German Jewish citizen to gradually become second class before the concentration camps were set up. This is in the early 30s. And even as a teenager, one of the things that I never forgot talking to her about Nazi Germany was this slow progression of disenfranchising people of civil rights, one law at a time. Yeah. How incredibly painful but silent it is because no one comes to help you. Yeah. And it's slow, and you're gradually losing your rights, and you can kind of see it happening one law at a time, the so-called Nuremberg laws. Yeah. So just even talking to her, as an 18-year-old, showed me that there are things that can be happening in society that are happening to lots of people that the mainstream either doesn't know about or chooses to ignore. Yeah. And fast forward to now, this also applies to people with paranormal experiences, quote unquote, because you all probably know people that have had an experience with something, or someone in your family that saw something that you might call a ghost, that had something strange happen to them. And they're very unlikely to tell it to people until you start talking about it. Now, I'm out there now. I have a YouTube channel. People know that I'm open to hearing about these sort of topics. So I get calls from people. People approach me at conferences. And it leads me to believe it just has an analogy to Nazi Germany, just in the sense that there could be a widespread set of experiences that people are having that they're not talking about.
Or they may not recognize.
Or they don't recognize.
So during all this, I had an experience at Machu Picchu, at Huayna Picchu, which is, there's Machu Picchu, and then there's like a tall spire, like this huge pillar of rock that looks over it. And this was in 2000. I was there alone. And It is unbelievably steep. Have you been there before?
No, I haven't.
So like, I mean, it is steep. Like at one point you have to like use a cable to walk up, and the trail is probably about as wide as this table, maybe like 2 feet, like there's not space for two, and then it's a sheer drop. And I was there by myself, and right next to me in the woods, like in the jungle, I think it would be more, but like you could not see into it, was something really big walking right next to me, like to my left. And I was like, oh my God, it's a jaguar. It's the only thing I could think of in my head. But it doesn't really make any sense that there's a jaguar on the top of this mountain following me. And then it wasn't until I watched these movies that I was like, maybe it was not.
Right. Okay, so you're raising a really good point. Is some of you may have had even experiences, and let's leave out people you know, and you weren't sure what they were, and you, as Arla said in the movie last night, you kind of filed it away, which is really the best thing to do with things you can't quite make sense of. Is don't forget about it, just kind of put it away. As Stanton Friedman, the UFO researcher, he called it the gray box. Just put it in the gray box for a while. Don't make a decision about it. You may have had experiences that after seeing a movie like Paranormal Bigfoot, you say, oh yeah, I did have something happen. I heard some strange howling sounds that didn't sound like any animal, or something was walking, but I couldn't see it, right?
Yeah.
So there is the possibility that we've all been conditioned so much into a normalized version of reality that we're surrounded by phenomena all the time, and we're pushing it away. I mentioned their first movie, the first Resonant Pro Cruise movie, Bigfoot Revealed, because in that movie they have all these psychological professionals towards the end of the movie saying that people are probably forgetting about their Bigfoot experiences. In fact, it's much more prevalent than people probably are aware of, but you can forget about experiences within a few minutes if it's really outside the range of your typical view of reality, right?
Yeah.
So I don't remember having any experiences with Bigfoot. I've camped all over the place by myself. I love to hike alone. I haven't experienced these things. But that doesn't mean it hasn't happened. It's maybe I'm not conscious of it. I'm not saying it has.
Sure.
But what we've learned from the Bigfoot research is the more I begin to talk about it with people, I've had friends who say, you just reminded me of something my grandfather told me growing up in Utah.
Yeah.
He used to say that there were these bipedal creatures walking through the backyard in Mountain Green, Utah, outside of Salt Lake. And this is what my friend said, I forgot about this I haven't thought about this in decades. You just reminded me of it. So we have a tendency to push these experiences back in our minds because it's not easy to talk about with other people. None of us generally, most of us don't voluntarily like to be ridiculed, right? We're raised to want to be accepted by other people,
right?
And so you could have had experiences that you've forgotten about. You could think about other experiences. So I think the nature of hidden events is as society begins to have a conversation about these topics, and yes, the government does need to get involved, which they are through congressional hearings. Mike Gold has been part of that. You gradually change the narrative, and eventually these topics go from being marginal, gray topics in the gray box into the mainstream, as I think will probably happen with the UFO, UAP topic, whatever those turn out to be. You can pick your theory. But I think it's going to happen with Bigfoot and cryptids because the more people I've talked to, I've gone to a lot of these conferences now, and I've talked to a lot of people. And I've talked to people who they have no reason to make this stuff up. And they tell me they've never even been to conferences before. They just wanted to find out what that experience was when they were a teenager. And I've heard a lot of stories from people who've encountered these creatures. And it's the full range of experiences from, benevolent, friendly experiences to sheer terror, to running out of those woods as fast as your legs will, faster than you think you can run. The full range of experiences, and it's not an easy topic to process, as Brett and Jill will tell you. This is an extremely strange topic. In Dark Matter Monsters, I've attempted to put a scientific framework around it just because there do seem to be characteristics which show up time and time again, which have overlap with the UFO phenomena and what we call ball lightning, coherent matter. There is some basis there. I think we can start to look at it. But one thing that hasn't helped is our own scientific and professional communities, academics, people in scientific institutions. I mean, ever since World War II, so much of the funding from science has come from the federal government. Right. From, National Science Foundation, NIH, just down the road, CDC, and people in academics, and I'm just talking to someone who comes out of academics, they are highly dependent on grant money, and they do not want to offend the powers that be looking at topics that might get them ridiculed by their colleagues, might prevent them from getting tenure like happened to Grover Krantz, and later Jeff Meldrum from Idaho State University recently passed away. Last year, another kind of pioneer in this area. So because of this centralized government funding ever since World War II, which is something that even Vannevar Bush, one of the kind of defense intelligence insiders who was so important in World War II, part of the Manhattan Project, he even warned about the dangers. He set up the National Science Foundation and institutions like that. And he warned about the dangers of centralized funding, limiting scientific inquiry, independent science. So in so many ways in the United States, we haven't made progress scientifically into these topics because of the stigma associated with studying them. And the few people that do, I happen to be near one, Grover Krantz, pay the price in their department, they get laughed at. You risk not getting funding again. And basically people are being blackmailed into not looking at these topics. But I just say to heck with it. We need to talk to people who are experiencing this because there are a wide range of experiences out in the woods. Sometimes they're injuries. People end up in the hospital. Those rocks can be pretty big when they're coming at you. And for some reason, Bigfoot are really good at throwing rocks. Now, 95% of the time, they're aiming just to scare you out of the area. But I know of cases where people are hit in the head by these huge, rocks. You're going to see this in one of the future Flash of Beauty films from Native Americans talking about this in Alaska. They weren't hit, but you can see the description of this. So this can be such a terrifying topic that people don't want to bring this up because of injuries. What do they say when they go to the hospital? I tripped on a rock. You will see in these testimonies, I didn't want to say what really happened. I had a friend in Boulder. She was my former dentist. She's retired now. She told me she was hiking with a friend in Rocky Mountain National Park. They're single file on a trail. She's 2 feet in front of their friend, and a huge softball-sized rock comes horizontally right in front of her friend's nose, knocks the friend down purely from a nervous reaction. She wasn't hit, but it was close enough to make her fall down. And there was nothing there. There were no people there, nothing. Just kind of your mind. So, who are you going to call? Who are you going to tell about that? So this is why this type of data can build up before you have people that are willing to look at it. There are a lot of reasons, why we may not want to talk about this. Just at a federal level, think of the national parks, National Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, people who have their jobs, careers, who really don't want to take the time to classify a new species. As Tom Cantrell, a Bigfoot researcher who just left us a couple weeks ago, told me, he said, this would be a total disaster for Endangered Species Act if this was shown to be real. Forests and there are a lot of economic interests. There's a lot of factors at play here. You could just even, at this level of what is the impediments institutionally to recognize something new, regardless if it's paranormal or not, right?
Right.
Yeah.
It's wild. Tell me about why dark matter monsters.
Well, the more I began looking at what people reported around Bigfoot, you start seeing these same patterns that happen in the environment before the encounters. You've heard with UFO encounters that people sometimes get these premonitions and things, and UFO researcher Jacques Vallée has talked about this. I've talked to him about it. And there are things that happen right before the encounter. When I started talking to these witnesses, I started going to conferences. What I saw there were about 9 major physical changes in the environment that happen before people encounter a Bigfoot. And I kept seeing this, not in every single case, but in many of them. You've heard in the UFO research, recently they came up with the 5 observables. And if you've heard that phrase mentioned, you know, like this hyperdimensional travel, transmedium travel, and various features of UFOs. But I found there was like what I call them the 9 imponderables, which were there's this sudden cold that people seem to experience. They said it got really cold all of a sudden before they encountered the Bigfoot. It got really quiet, right? There was a smell of sulfur, some sort of weird burnt smell. And a sense of time changing, like slowing down. A projected fear. Now, this is interesting. People say that they feel this sense of terror starting, but it's like a switch. And it feels like it's coming from the outside. In other words, you know you're not it feels like something's projecting fear onto you. I just call it projected fear. And there's another feature. This will also be shown in a future Flash of Beauty film about the Sierra Sounds. There's this type of weird directed sound, which people say sometimes the howl growl from the Bigfoot is the loudest sound they ever heard in their lives. It sounds like something like a Tyrannosaurus Rex mixed with Godzilla. It's as loud as a freight train. And yet someone 100 yards away didn't hear it in the same campground. So it's almost like sound becomes like a laser. You could call it like coherent sound. So when you look at these patterns which show up around Bigfoot, but I have to say it's not just Bigfoot, it's the other types of creatures that people encounter out there, some of whom we don't even quite have names for.
Like what?
Well, since you asked, there is a werewolf type creature that some people call Dogman.
Is that Chupacabra?
No, it's some sort of canine type creature on 2 legs. I've heard enough encounters of this. This is even more terrifying than Bigfoot, which is why you're even less likely to hear about it. But I've heard about this from reliable witnesses, the descriptions. Yeah, and there's other things. There's shorter, there's the little people. The people of the natives of the Northwest talked about the bugwas. These are kind of, they call them the little people. Either like mini Bigfoots or a whole nother species. There are different types of species out there. But you find...
Like Chaka from Land of the Lost?
Maybe. I don't know.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know this could strain your level of believability, but this is what you encounter
but like
when you listen.
I have not heard of any of this. This is crazy.
Well, to go back to your question, Jason, neither had I before. But the thing is, when you're doing science, what you're looking for is repeatability.
Yeah.
And when you hear this from witnesses over, and you read books, you can read books by Rusty Wilson, Tom Lyons, Paul G. Buckner from Oklahoma, part of the Oklahoma tribes. And you read these accounts and you start seeing the same thing over and over again. And you've talked to UFO witnesses. This is something I studied even before Bigfoot. You can take a look at my book back there, Black Swan Ghosts, about my encounter with UFO witnesses. You get these same sort of symptoms showing up, these same sort of characteristics, sudden fogs. When you look across the scientific literature, you find all those features associated with this state of matter called coherent matter that I talk about in the movie, that's associated with cold fusion, low energy nuclear reaction research, something that the DOE recently says is real and they're researching it. It's a type of matter that is correlated where the particles start becoming phase locked with each other. It's a quantum type of matter. All of those features, including the directed sound, the sudden change in temperatures, the silence, are all associated with these vortex-like structures.
Yeah.
What is called magnetohydrodynamics. You could think of it, something you're all familiar with, tornadoes. Vortex-type structure. When you get those types of structures, there's a lot of research going back to the 50s from a Russian Soviet researcher, Zeldovich, all the way up to the present, that says that type of matter interacts with neutrinos, with dark matter, and exotic types of matter that normally we don't have any interaction with.
Yeah.
So when you look just empirically at the types of experiences that Bigfoot witnesses and UFO witnesses say happens to them, which are entirely believable. Someone walking along in a national park in summer, and all of a sudden they had to put their sweater on. And then they had this encounter. A sudden fog came in out of nowhere. You look in the labs of people doing cold fusion, low energy, nuclear reaction. I think people now call it coherent energy transformations. And you listen to them. Oh, there was a sudden change. It got cold. Yeah. There was a change in sound. Oh, another feature, something that I've always been interested is electromagnetic collapse. In other words, devices failing.
Yeah.
Now, it wouldn't surprise you to know that people experience this around UFO sightings. Even Ford Motor Company did a study in the 70s of why cars stall around UFOs. I mean, this UFO subject, folks, this research goes back to the 50s, Project Blue Book. This is a whole nother subject.
Yeah.
You get electromagnetic failure. And so it's not surprising why, if you're around a UFO, would you get your car stalling, your radio? You probably saw this in movies.
Yeah.
Close Encounters of the Third. Yeah, right. So why does it happen around Bigfoot? Because one of the biggest shocks to me at these conferences was talking to researchers, and they said, we were out on this Bigfoot, night watch. We got back, none of our cars would start. All the batteries were dead. And then you talk to other witnesses, and they said, well, my brand new iPhone just went on the fritz. Just as I was about to take a video of the creature, the whole phone went dead.
Yeah.
And they said, I felt disoriented. That's another feature here, what's called brain fog. They said they couldn't even find their way back to the car, and their partner was back there hitting rocks together to try to tell them which direction. Yeah. All these effects seem to. Why would you get electromagnetic effects around a North American wood ape if it's an ape? Right. Have you ever been to the zoo and you had electromagnetic failure and brain fog? No. Right. So this shows us it's very hard for us to conceive of this.
Yeah.
But the closest you're going to come is to watch one of those Predator movies with Arnold in it.
Have you seen Predator? Movies,
where you see that shimmering
no judgment. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen it? Yeah. It's great. So there was a scene in the film last night where this woman caught that on camera, and it was bonkers.
Yeah, we saw that last night. It's in one of Dave Paulides' Missing 411 movies, where a UFO researcher's wife said she was in Ohio, and this shimmering thing just showed up in the tree right across from her. Now, you hear it once, and you're thinking, seriously? I mean, guys, I was on the debate team in high school. We used to come down to Washington, D.C. from New York to do model constitutional conventions. I was in the House of Representatives, the only group in history to be allowed to use, civilian group, to use the House of Representatives, this kind of high school group.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I am from this evidence-oriented background. The first time you hear about these, think, seriously? But how about if you hear this again and again and over years of going to conferences? I've been going to these conferences since the 90s, ever since I got involved there. You keep hearing this and you're thinking, it's really real. My mind has to catch up with reality. I thought, I have a PhD. I understand how no. People see something that looks like this shimmering predator effect, or they see it. Now, here's another thing. All the witnesses I've heard talk about these creatures going invisible. I know to your mind this seems unbelievable. They say it went invisible in front of my eyes. They all describe the way it went invisible. They say it looks pixelated, like it's shimmering, and then it turns into little pixels, sparkly lights, and then it's gone. I've heard this over. These are people who are not talking to. How are they coming up with this? That's hidden events. It's some type of data that we're not familiar with, and unfortunately, physics and major physical sciences have never told us about this. They've ignored it, and we know this from Project Blue Book and the UFO research. There's been an effort to discredit witnesses. In the UFO field, what you're going to find out over the next couple of years is that we've been subject to a disinformation program. That's what I think is likely to happen. that the government actually was paying to confuse us about UFOs for whatever reasons. We'll all find out. I'm not sure exactly. But it seems in the Bigfoot world, the same sort of thing. People did not share these types of experiences because it's strange. And even when you hear it, you think you're open-minded, you're thinking, really, something going in, but you hear it over and over again, you realize this is one of the characteristics. So the reason you end up with dark matter monsters is you realize you're dealing with a life form that is accessing another state of matter. It's a state of matter that physics is familiar with called coherent matter. We're all familiar with lasers, or you've seen flocks of birds in those murmurations where it seems like a wave.
Yeah.
That is the analogy to what we're talking about here. And the research seems to show that that quantum state of matter, where the matter lines up and it's monochromatic and it's acting in a focused way, like a laser, is something that defense contractors have been filing patents for in coherent matter wave beams to create cloaking. I mean, you can see this in the patents: invisibility, cloaking, projecting things into a distance, communications without electromagnetic signals, or being able to knock out the other guy's electromagnetics at a distance, that sort of thing. Okay, so when you see that this is part of classified defense contractor patents, that it's something the Department of Defense is interested in, it's not really a huge stretch to imagine that there are life forms that are accessing this state of matter. And it just takes you have to be honest with yourself. Maybe there's a huge chunk of reality that we really don't understand. And for whatever reason, the institutions that we grew up around chose just to pretend like it wasn't happening for their own benefit because they wanted those grants to keep coming in, right? They wanted the grant. And so they just said, oh, we're just going to tell people they saw a bear. You know, you saw Venus, you saw flocks of geese. It's a misidentification. It was swamp gas.
Right.
You saw swamp gas.
Right.
You know?
What's the other one? Balloon? Like a
weather balloon.
Weather balloon.
It was weather. So you see what's going on here. I'm not saying I have all the answers here, but it's not inconceivable at this point that the major institutions we've been around ever since I've been alive, that this has been going on since the 50s, has been to push this away, push it back. But eventually reality catches up. And the witnesses come forward, and there's a lot of them, and you can see these kind of correlations, and that's how you end up with the idea. I'm not saying that they're literally monsters, though some of the people I've talked to feel like they had monster-like qualities, and sometimes it does seem like that. We don't really know what we're dealing with here, but it's just being honest, admitting we are dealing with something that we don't understand, and whether science accepts it or not, it's like tough luck. Science has to catch up at this point. Right. Science has to catch up.
One of my favorite shows, it was called Through the Wormhole. That was with Morgan Freeman. It was, I'd say, probably 10, 15 years ago. Has anyone ever seen this? I think it was on Discovery Network, but it was essentially all of it was modern physics, like to that point described, and a lot of things they had, like they would have little animation vignettes, and one of the things, since we were talking about this earlier, was the temperature scale for lighting. There was for those of you, so we were talking earlier, so the lighting in Lost Origins is a very specific, they're custom light bulbs at 3000 Kelvin. So lighting is measured, the color spectrum has a temperature associated with it. And so the scientist, and I cannot remember who it was, it may be a guy named Kelvin, to be honest, now that I'm thinking out loud, was measuring. He had a prism projecting a rainbow on a table and put thermometers, like mercury thermometers, on the table. And there was an extra one. And all of them were reading were reading temperatures. And there was one that was not in the prism that was the hottest. And that is how they discovered that we have an infrared spectrum. Oh, yeah. And so, like, something as simple, that happy accident, or something like penicillin, like, that's kind of crazy. The mold on the bread, there are these
accidents.
There are these moments in science where it goes from accident, pseudoscience to cold hard fact.
There you go.
And so my headspace around all of this is like, we are at the phase. This is the thermometer on the table.
No, Jason, I'm really glad you brought that up, because even if you look at the history of science, all these new discoveries at the time that we now consider to be obviously true, like electromagnetism, people laughed at it at the time. I mean, Michael Faraday and James Clerk Maxwell were accused of doing airy-fairy metaphysics. It's literally what people said back then. The Wright brothers, there was a headline, I think, in one of these newspapers here in Washington: liars, flyers, or liars. We've always, in the history of science, been wrong about new discoveries. I remember reading a book in college called 100 Scientists Prove Einstein Wrong. It was in the stacks at Wesleyan University. 100 scientists. We don't remember a single name of any of those 100 scientists at this point, but that was the reaction to Einstein. So it's not surprising that a topic like this would be controversial, and it's just surprising how close-minded the institutions are after decades, plus perhaps federal government misinformation programs and things. But in the history of science, I mean, there was a time magnetism was thought to be paranormal. You don't think of magnetism being paranormal anymore. Right. Electricity, all these major inventions, the idea that, plate tectonics.
Do you know the book Krakatoa? Simon Winchester came out 20-ish years ago. It's about Krakatoa, the largest explosion that man has, since we've been connected through telegraph. It was also, it's in this, I can't remember the name of the strait, but it's on the island of Krakatoa in Java, and there is the tectonic plate that on either side of this plate, it's a strait that's about 11 miles wide. There are completely two separate sets of animals on either different side. All of the animals will just say east and west. On the west side of the strait are all European animals, and all of the animals on the right side are Asian animals. And they're literally right down the middle. And that book, Krakatoa, goes over the discovery of, it's like a little history of plate tectonics. It was also, the explosion was so intense and it shot ash so far in the air, which causes light pollution. People in Poughkeepsie, New York, saw this, and this is in Indonesia. They reported that there was a fire off in the distance. So people all over the planet were reporting that they saw fires off in the distance because this explosion was so visceral.
Right.
The point to all of that is they were taking these core samples. This is how magnetic north, they figured out like magnetic north was moving, was that they were taking these core samples in the basalt, not the atoms, like when basalt
Crystallizes.
Thank you. Yeah. Just have a scientist next to you whenever you're trying to tell us something.
We have a lot of basalt in the north.
Yes, but so when the basalt would crystallize and solidify, it points to magnetic north always.
Right.
And so they were confused when they were taking these core samples that there were all these different angles of where the north was, and so it took something. Yet again, it's like over and over and over these samples to then figure out, okay, our Earth is sliding on top of a core. Look, it sounds crazy when you talk about it right now. And so the fact that we're all in this room here, we have these, what I would call wild conversations about other forms of life and other forms of matter and everything else, which feels like a head experience, is kind of being condensed into a lived experience. And when it goes from head to life, that is when reality sets in. And for me, that is kind of the most interesting part for a lot of this. Is like, for a lot of people, you can hear about someone else's experience, but when it goes, like you said, like when the testimony compiles, Epstein style, enough.
Right.
When there's enough, then people start to listen. Yeah. And there's so much things that are piling up that I feel just as an individual, and in a place that keeps getting. I've been open for 9 years. It's been like the past year and a half. I have gotten these are like 3 things. I've gotten a lot of requests to host things on this matter. I was like, I'm just like, yes, let's just do all of them now, you know?
Jason, as I was mentioning last night, there was a sighting in Hanover, Maryland in 2001 at the Arundel Mills Mall. Security guards saw something approach their van and run away on 2 legs. They called the police. The policeman responded. One of them said he saw glowing red eyes 8 feet off the ground in the forest, and he found footprints 12 to 15 inches long. And the official explanation was it was a bear. Have you ever met a bear that makes footprints 12 to 15 inches long? I mean, we're not in Montana with grizzly bears, right. 8 feet off the ground. Have you seen bears with glowing red eyes? Because I haven't. I've seen a lot of bears, and none of their eyes were glowing red. Right. So, I mean, you've had sightings right in this area. As the movie pointed out last time, you have Bigfoot sightings in every state. I've even heard of cases from Hawaii, even though those aren't considered official cases. But, I mean, it is something that's widespread. But what seems to happen is the official response always is something parochial and ordinary. You saw a bear. This is what forest workers are told. They said, if you know it's good for you, you saw a bear, right? If you want to keep your job. So that's the type of thing. So there's this pressure put on the people that have the most experience with it. But I agree with you, Jason. I think eventually the information builds up. We're living in a great time for information flow because we have podcasts and we have the internet and YouTube, and you can hear a lot of these encounters. If you're curious about any things I'm talking about, there are a very large number of podcasts out there that you just search for this and you listen. I want you to listen to some of this witness testimony for yourselves. You make your mind up. Do these people sound like they're telling you the truth? Right. Maybe thousands of people have made this all up and I'm wrong, but I'm going with the other side. I think these are hidden events. People who have been unlikely to want to share their stories, and maybe they even forgot about their own encounters because it just didn't fit, and it's hard for your mind to make sense of seeing a big
one of the most
out there.
Messed up books I ever read. This is a really dope book. It was about it's a nonfiction book. It's about a satanic cult in South Carolina, where the cult would do human sacrifice, and the cult took place in the basement of a church. It's a real book, and they had to redact part of the details so people could not read it and use it as a ritual guide. Was how kind of crazy it was.
Yeah.
And it was the most messed up thing I've ever read. But the book was written from a psychological standpoint where there was child abuse involved, so these kids would see these rituals and it was so insane and so terrifying and so polarizing that they would bury it deep, 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 to the point that they did not know that they had this experience. So it was this book that had this kind of crazy topic, but it was about ritual abuse, and the main character in the story became the priest, like the satanic priest at the Christian church. And there was a moment where there was a lightning storm, a thunderstorm or something that caused a memory for him to remember what it was very faint. It was like a memory of what he experienced as a kid. And then it is his unraveling of like recognizing he has become a part of this thing that he never even wanted to remember. And it is him, it's the overall arch is him leaving the satanic cult.
Good idea.
Because he has this memory. But like the point of that is the human brain is conditioned to suppress and forget something that is traumatic. And every once in a while, you get something that pulls it out, or you get something that's not as traumatic, so it's not buried as deep. And so there's these levels of consciousness that we are programmed by human nature to forget because it's not common or it's not comfortable or whatever. And then you get dark matter monster. You have an encounter like this that can bring something out, and then here we go.
Right. And one example of that, we're all familiar with Aurora Borealis, but according to Air Force studies, 1 out of 20 Americans have seen ball lightning. Do you remember seeing ball lightning? I've seen it a couple times, and it's so brief and it's so hard to understand because it doesn't actually literally burn anything. You could forget about it. I was trying to find the pictures of ball lightning in here. But so there are a range of experiences we might have had that it just helps to start reading about it. It might bring back memories. I've had people who've started reading this who all of a sudden told me they had very vivid dreams of Bigfoot. That they said, where did that come from? Is it just, it's hard to know exactly what's going on there. Right. But the reason this all matters ultimately is we could be making a lot of scientific progress with the UFO subject. We could have better relations with Bigfoot instead of it being these scary random encounters that people have. Just having a picnic. It could happen to you at Rock Creek Park or somewhere like this. Believe me, these creatures come very close into urban areas. Instead of it being something that we keep suppressing, we could be learning more about our own history, evolution, who are we, where do we come from. On the UFO aspect of it, there's a lot of technological progress we could be making towards more environmentally friendly technologies, ways of generating energy, propulsion. And a lot of this has been classified in Air Force black budget programs and other programs because it has to do with gravity, anti-gravity, propulsion, things which people in those programs say they don't want our adversaries getting before we develop it. They're really afraid of China or Russia getting these technologies before we do. That's the justification I'm told exists for this sort of cover-up of the discussion. I'm not just saying of the evidence, of the discussion itself, which Congress is pushing back against finally. So I think the positive side of this is, sure, this sort of scientific progress has really been held back for many decades now, in my view. Because of the classification during World War II, which we could understand at the time, but it's never gone away. And it seems to have gone into an overly dark mode where we're paying for this research. It's from federally funded money, our tax dollars. We should know where the research, what it's showing us. Department of Energy is another good example of extensive research into cold fusion and low energy nuclear reaction. You never hear them talking about it. We've run into people at these conferences. Jill was there one time when someone came up from the DOE. And I asked this, he had just seen Paranormal Bigfoot. And I asked him what he did at DOE, plasma research. And I asked him, did what you saw in the movie, did it make sense? And Jill was there. She heard it. He said yes. Right. He understood about coherent matter and other states of matter that generate a lot of energy. It shouldn't be just in these classified programs unless, there's some absolutely good reason to justify it. So I feel that we're holding back science, understanding, cultural development by not talking about these topics. They're not really paranormal. That's a way to stigmatize them. They're just things that we don't have a really clear understanding. There was a time we didn't really understand electromagnetism either, but we've kind of tamed it a little bit. It's in all of our devices right now. We wouldn't have the modern life we have without some sort of control of electromagnetism, right? So there's so much to learn here, and I think we should move in that direction rather than pushing it away and making fun of it and laughing at it. We all understand the necessity to have national security for various technologies. None of us are against having classified research, but it can go on for decades. It can go on for too long. Even the Clintons were really concerned about this, about overclassification. Remember, John Podesta was leading that effort to declassify things that don't. Because I've talked to people who've been in these programs. I've talked to people that were in OSAP, the first UFO, the more recent one from 2008. There have been programs ever since Project Blue Book. We're told even right now by James Lukatsky. He wrote this book you might be interested in, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, about cryptids and DOD research into cryptids and UFOs at Skinwalker Ranch in Utah, which you might be familiar with. But that program, I've talked to people that were in that program, and they tell me that the science is suffering because of the overclassification and the ridicule of these topics, that even the people that work in these programs cannot talk to the person at the next desk. So because it's so classified and siloed and compartmentalized. So if you run into a technical or scientific dead end, there's no one to talk to about it. It's not like you can just go up to someone or email a friend or go onto Facebook, what do you think about X, Y, or Z? You can't talk about it, or you're going to jail.
Right.
So it's stifling. They tell me that it's stifling their show. And one of these folks told me, he said, the money is good, but the science isn't. That's a quote from someone from OSAP. And we should expect more. We should expect more. And because it's classified, we don't even hear these people aren't talking to us. I mean, I ask them, I go up to them, ask them until the point where they say, I can't talk about it. But they tell me things like that.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot to learn here, and it could help, it could help the entire planet to move forward technologically into non-destructive technologies. I think the main lesson is you should pay attention to your experiences, and the next time you hear a friend or relative tell you about something like this, you might want to ask them a little more about it than just assuming that they had a hallucination or saw a bear or whatever you're thinking, because I'm like you, I had the same reaction. Just pause for a second, because that person may have never had a chance to talk about this before. And if you ask a question, it gives them an opportunity to share, and they might remember more. I mean, and together, if our scientific institutions aren't going to do this, together we can all put this together and make sense of it as a community. Brett and Jill have an excellent YouTube channel, the Flash of Beauty channel. As they were saying last night, you can hear witness after witness. I mean, it's amazing. They're doing this for free. You can just turn on their channel and listen to one excellent account after another. They must have like 40 or 50 witnesses up there at this. Yeah, maybe over 100 by now. An amazing account. I challenge you to listen to some of these witnesses, and they can keep talking for an hour. And some of the things they say, it's like, wow, but it fits. It fits the pattern, and that's how you know you're dealing with something that has some scientific basis. There's a pattern there. You see it over and over again. They might not be mentioning creatures that you were raised to believe in, but you should give them the benefit of the doubt and just listen to this, because maybe you know someone that had a similar encounter. There have been people that have looked into this sort of afterlife communication. There was one fellow in Boulder who called it instrumental transpirit communication, and he would play us tapes of people that we know had passed on. There had been a funeral, and yet people that worked with him said that is them, and he recorded these conversations with them. Apparently, they would describe what it's like over there, coming through fax machines or phones. It's something, again, very at the edge of what we're trained to believe is real. But he had these repeated, he did very good research. He didn't insist you believed it. And so there is a connection to it. And I would say even going back to one of the original UFO sightings, and this is something that was part of OSAP, believe it or not, James Lukatsky and all those people from DOD and DIA, right in your neighborhood here, that worked in the OSAP program. It's an acronym that it was designed to kind of sound like just a aerospace acronym, Advanced Aerospace Weapons Application Systems Application. They talked about these types of experiences of UFO experiencers going all the way back to Kenneth Arnold from 1947, the original sighting that created the term flying saucer. This businessman working with search and rescue out of Boise, looking for a crashed plane on Mount Rainier. And in Lukatsky's second book, he talks about how Kenneth Arnold encountered disincarnate entities around the home, ball lightning inside the home, and shadowy figures and things like this. So this is what makes it really interesting. Why are all these phenomena connected from UFOs to Bigfoot? It's often seen in the same place, to ball lightning and orbs, even to entities and afterlife communication. It just suggests that there's a reality beyond the physical structures that we can directly sense, where things connect in ways that we don't completely understand. But even going back to 1947, OSAP, something new to me, tells us that those experiencers way back then, before the internet, before this was even talked about, were experiencing these types of phenomena that our own government research programs, talk about. It's hard to get funding. When you listen to Lukatsky and others, they say, it was very hard to get funding for it again because of the type of subject matter we're talking about. But it suggests a level of awareness, including remote viewing, beyond the immediate physical reality that we can see. And Bigfoot fits into this too, which again suggests that there's just a lot more for all of us to learn about and discover, right? I think it's kind of cool. There's a lot of secrecy around people that are involved in these topics. Yeah. And some of it is just hard to believe as a citizen of the US that there is this level of security around a topic that we've been told to make fun of, that was a weather balloon or swamp gas, and you hear what's really involved in these recovery operations, how serious the security is. You don't want to come across these folks.
Right.
They have orders to shoot on sight anyone that comes within their visual range. This is how critically important the federal government considers these recovery operations. That's what I'm told.
Yeah.
So it gets pretty serious pretty fast. But no, I'm telling you what I know. I'm just not mentioning all the names because most people say you can repeat the story, but just don't mention my name or you change. Sometimes I've been told in dark matter monsters, I will tell you I know a former Secretary of Defense who worked under Reagan. Mm-hmm. And I heard a couple stories from him that it took a lot of work to get permission to say.
Right.
And he said, okay, you can say this if you don't say X, Y, and Z. And one of these stories was where there was a collapse of the electromagnetic field in a town in the Midwest in the 60s. And the Pentagon couldn't figure out what was going on. He said that wristwatches stopped working. Not the AC circuits, batteries stopped working, as if electromagnetism ceased to be in this one area. And he said they never could figure out what was going on. Was there a UFO hovering there? Did a mini black hole, I mean, this is my idea, something come into the atmosphere? And he said, we never even intervened. Yeah. We never went over there, but how do you think we knew that this was going on? I said, I don't know. He said, no, I can't tell you. I can't. That's classified. I can't tell you how we know these things. Right. But I mean, it's things like that are fairly astounding, but it can take a while to get permission. Even this person did not want to share that story. And I said, okay, if I agree not to mention which state it happened in and exactly what year, can I put it? He said, yeah, okay. There would be, as they moved around, some sort of effect on the electromagnetic field, that it's probably from satellites or something. They can see these little anomalies. So yeah, they probably can track it. And I think they don't want to scare all of you. I think that's why they don't want to talk about this. They want you going out to the national parks. Right. They want you going on a picnic to Rock Creek Park in these places. And they don't want you worrying about Dogman and Bigfoot. But I have to tell you honestly, you could encounter these things. That's my view of it. You don't have to agree with me, but based on my research, when you step out of your door of your house, you could encounter anything. And I'm serious, they have not wanted to scare us. It goes all the way back to the 50s and these studies from the Brookings Institution. There could be social collapse if people really, you can read why the research, suggested we might panic. War of the Worlds type situation. I don't know if we would panic anymore, but I think there's a lot more out there you can, and this is not all scary negative stuff. You could encounter cool stuff too, but I think there, for some reason in our society, much more than in Russia or other societies, there has been like a lid placed on this topic. And while you can find the government programs that have something to do with it, if you don't believe me, just read James Lukatsky's 3 books, starting with Skinwalkers at the Pentagon and the 2 newer ones. And he has said, this is all I can tell you without, being in a SCIF, a secure, informational facility in Congress. I can't talk, but everything I'm putting in the book is what I can tell you, and I can't even tell Congress anymore than what's in the book. So you read these books, and he talks about this strange crossover between UFOs and psychic phenomena. It's right in Lukács's book. UFOs equals psychic. Why? If these are metal ships with these little guys coming from another planet, why the psychic experience unless it's a completely different explanation? Maybe they're from here. Maybe it has something to do with us and it's not really extraterrestrial or not. I mean, or maybe the answer is really complex, that it's partly extraterrestrial, partly interdimensional, and partly something to do with you. I mean, maybe there's a much bigger story to the human race than we ever imagined about who we are, where we come from, involving these visitors in their craft, these Sasquatch and other creatures. And they just felt like we were in kindergarten, but maybe we're going to get to go to first grade now, guys. I mean, our President Trump, just a few blocks away, said just 2 weeks ago that he was issuing a directive to declassify this. We haven't seen this directive in any of the federal registers yet. I'm not sure it really exists, but Donald said we are going to get a declassification. And I would like to see, just looking at Lukács at the tip of the iceberg from DIA, a really top-notch missile system analyst telling us this is all real. And the blowback they got from the other intelligence agencies when they wanted to expand these programs and they were told, this is going to make us look weird. We're the new kid on the block. Department of Homeland Security said to him, we're too new. This is going to make us look weird. We don't want to look weird. This is literally what they said. They were concerned about our appearance. Well, we can see what happened to DHS recently with the defunding. But at some point, they have to step up to the plate and protect us and inform us and proceed with the education about what we've been calling paranormal, because there's so much to learn here. And wouldn't it be nice to go to the next grade? Okay, I say it's time we moved ahead and we start the discussion. We're doing it tonight. Well, let's just make it bigger. In 2013, I was at the citizen hearing at the National Press Club. That was 5 days of witnesses. The Washington Post had a op-ed about it from one of their reporters. I saw her there. I talked to her. She just made fun of it. Why do old military guys, that's what she said, old military guys believe in little green men. And it was just ridicule after ridicule. I mean, well, the tone has changed now.
Yeah.
You know, ever since Harry Reid got involved, Senator Inouye and Ted Stevens from Alaska, and they said, look, this is a national security issue. What are these crap?
Senator Inouye was involved too?
Senator Inouye. Ted Stevens had a sighting in World War II. Inouye had some sort of connection to the UFO topic.
So a little fun fact.
Yes, go.
Senator Inouye's son is the guitarist of one of DC's most influential punk rock bands.
There you go.
Kenny.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
There you go.
They're called Marginal Man.
I'm going to look him up.
Yeah, they're killer.
Inouye was a real hero with UFO disclosure. You remember that speech he gave once in the Senate? He said that there was a secret Navy and a secret Army and a secret Air Force and everything, and what's going on, where's the money going? He was right. But it's time that we moved ahead. If our president said 2 weeks ago, we're moving ahead with disclosure, well, I'm moving ahead with it. Yeah. And I hope that Donald comes along, because he said he was going to do it. And I think we should hold them accountable. We've had these weird drone sightings in New Jersey. I have friends in New Jersey. I'm from the New York area. They've seen these things. I've talked to people in New Jersey. They don't know what these objects hovering over their street all night are, and we haven't been told anything. Right. So I think it's just a question of accountability. We often say that we're a country that has transparency. Well, let's get some transparency here. And I'm not saying to do it in a catastrophic way, scare people. When you go out in a national park or national forest, you should know the risks. You need to know what you could encounter. I've had friends who ridiculed me for writing books like this, only to encounter them just a couple weeks later at their vacation cottage in Arizona, and they didn't want to go outside in the woods for a year. Right. And they called me and they said, Simeon, I want to apologize. I thought you were one of these nutcases, and I encountered it, and it was weird. And they said, I don't ever want to see that again. I don't want to be surprised by something that's 12 feet tall looking in my window.
I'm so happy my wife is not here.
So we don't need to be this scared. You know, we could start a gradual. I have a petition on change.org for the federal government to recognize Bigfoot. Just go to change.org/protect Bigfoot. Look it up. Change.org/spin up. Protect Bigfoot. I just want some federal recognition. I know Tom Cantrell, I talked with him about this. He disagreed with me. He felt it was going to be like the spotted owl interfering with forestry and logging. He's a logger. He was a logger.
Yeah.
But I think it's time just to, my friend who encountered this in Arizona came up with the idea. We've been talking a lot about how to deal with this. She said, just in areas where Bigfoot's been sighting, just put up a little Bigfoot carving or something. Don't say anything. Just put a carving or a little indication that you could encounter this here. This has been seen somewhere in the past decade, just so you don't get frightened out of your wits when these creatures show up, because they're curious about people and we don't have a great relationship with them. Brett was saying last night, one of the reasons why they may not like us, they saw how we treated Native Americans, the destruction of the bison, millions. You know, we didn't treat these people or animals very well. It was an extermination campaign. And they may have seen this and said, we don't want anything to do with these Caucasian people, okay? I don't know what they call us, but they seem to run away pretty quick, but sometimes they still have a hostility. I think we need to get over the hostility, and it should be reasonably okay to go out in the woods. We have missing people out there. We don't know what's going on with that. So this is something that we do need to talk about as a national issue. This is why I call this phenomena a black swan ghost event. If you've read Nicholas Taleb Nassim, Black Swan, his economist. Right. So we're not good at dealing with rare events socially. We tend to suppress these things, pretend like it's not going to happen. It happened in the 2007-8 credit crunch when the banking system collapsed and the federal government had to rescue all these banks over that weekend, remember? Mm-hmm. Because these interlocking loans, it was considered just something statistically that would happen once out of 10,000 years. They had done some studies. Wall Street had done studies about this. It was supposed to happen once out of 10,000 years, then it happened 2 years later after the studies. And the economy would have collapsed if the federal government hadn't stepped in to refund the banking system because of these interlocking collateralized loan agreements and so forth. So these are events that are considered so unlikely, they get to be suppressed and not talked about. But if you read Lukatsky's books, there are injuries to people that are around UFOs, various types of cancers, leukemia. We need to understand this better. Even if it's not super common, we still owe it to the experiencers of this. And Lukatsky talks about this openly in his 3 books. There are unexplained injuries. We think it has something to do with the way that the craft modulates space-time. I talked about it in a little bit in the movie. Changing the space-time metric itself changes how frequencies of light, how we experience them. And it shifts these frequencies into the ultraviolet and to carcinogenic frequencies, which is why people get burned from being around UFOs, why they appear blue and so forth. So there are occasional injuries from people who've been around these types of craft. The Bigfoot side of it is, from what we know, the park services do not want to scare visitors away. They tell their park rangers, we're the blue and green, we don't scare people. They want you to believe you're going to have a safe experience. So when someone does have one of these encounters, if the park service ever finds out about it, or people come back and talk to rangers, they will tell them, look, we've known about this, but we're just told to keep it quiet. The park ranger in Yellowstone, Bob Action Jackson, the only park ranger there to talk about it, was fired. And he was one of the most popular gung-ho guys keeping poachers coming down from Montana into Wyoming. He patrolled that section and he said he saw these creatures twice. He went public and he got fired. So I would say just the way that the Navy pilots from the Nimitz incident in 2004, Air Force have told us they haven't wanted to talk about this for fear of repercussions on their military careers. The people in these park services have basically been told, literally, in one case I know, if you talk about this, you're out of your job in 24 hours. So there have been these structural, barriers for people not to talk about it. And I think that's one of the reasons why the witnesses are told by whoever these guys that show up are, we're not sure who they are, but it seems like the same folks show up. You saw a bear, right? If you know it's good for you. People have been threatened. If there have been tourists from other countries, you'll Your visa is going to be taken away. You're going to be thrown out. There's a lot of threats here. So I think that's why you haven't heard more about it. People get killed in Montana by bear every year. You can just say it's another bear attack. It's a pack of wild dogs. This is what you hear when people go to law enforcement with their encounter. On Sasquatch Chronicles, there's this woman, Claire, around episode 800. She talks about this encounter at Carmel Wildlife Reserve, just south of Carmel in California. The pressure that was put on her by the local, she actually had to go to the hospital. The creatures didn't injure her. They dragged her back for some reason to her car. And she had some bruises and stuff after she fainted from fear. She wakes up by the car, she calls the police, and they just say, you saw a bear. If you know what's good for you, you saw a bear. So I would say that people are reporting it. If you look at these encounters, go onto the BFRO.net site. This is Bigfoot Reporting Organization. Mm-hmm. They're not even into the spooky woo-woo side of this. They just go in, but they literally send out investigators to talk to people. You will see how often people are, reprimanded by law enforcement for bringing it up and told that it's just some conventional explanation. Just like UFOs, you're going to be told you saw ice crystals, you saw a weather balloon. You can use that weather balloon for a couple decades. So that would be my response. I think that there's pushback based on my, talking to folks and listening to their testimony that they're, the people that are in the best position to talk about this, law enforcement, forest rangers, and so forth, consistently say that they are told by their department bosses, don't mention it. So just going down the whole chain of command. But I think, at some point it'll change. But maybe if it was more common, they would have interest. But these things are still kind of at the edge. They're rare enough that you can get away with saying that it has some sort of conventional wildlife because people are injured by people. I think I read recently more people are killed by deer than bear in the U.S. The deer can charge too. You can always attribute these things to natural. You saw Venus. It works for a while until it doesn't. And it will stop once Congress wants to really get to the bottom. Like I think they're starting to do, we can hope with UFOs. We seem like we're getting some movement. And I think Mike Gold kind of reinforced that last night. Yeah. You won't believe the pressure that's put on people in the military. I mean, you land and you've seen something. If you radioed in that you saw these things, I have a case of that in my book, Black Swan Ghosts. I mean, there are guys waiting to take your camera as you land. I see this as sort of the same type of thing. We have enough core group of witnesses to this phenomena, let alone the creatures themselves. We should know what the reality of this is, and people should know when they go out to some of these areas that there are a history of sightings there. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been out to west to any national parks out there. Any of those parks you've been to, believe me, there have been a lot of Bigfoot encounters, and they're not all pleasant. There are some very hostile encounters. And people just leave quickly, and sometimes they call the National Service, and they said, it's bear. Okay, yeah, you get data. I have to say, that's a very good question because people I know that worked at DIA told me they were shocked at how accurate X-Files were. They knew of cases and they said someone in DIA had to be leaking information to the guy that created that show. He must have been in contact because they said he knew things that show sometimes replicated real cases. Yeah. And how did they know that? Someone had to be talking, whoever that guy was that. So I think, okay, so this gets into your question again. We have a lot of evidence that Hollywood is very cautious, but they like to proceed once they get the okay from the government that it's okay to make a movie about such and such a topic, because we've been told that the intelligence agencies send advisors to these shows about how far they can go, or they give them little hints. So I know it sounds conspiratorial. When I first heard this the first time, I said, seriously? But that seems to be what's going on. And we have this Spielberg movie coming out.
What's that?
Disclosure Day.
What's it called?
Disclosure Day.
Disclosure Day. A Disclosure Day. Spielberg is at it again. Now, Steven Spielberg was the one. We have a witness who was there when Ronald Reagan screened Close Encounters of the Third Kind at the White House, in the movie theater they have in the White House. And apparently, Ronald Reagan, he liked to go to bed early, so he didn't stay through all the credits, but he got up and said to Steven Spielberg, I bet there aren't 3 people in this room that know how true this is, and turned and went to bed.
Well,
And Spielberg has never commented on that, but there were people there who said they heard this because it's a small movie screening room in there.
Yeah.
So you kind of wonder how much there is this interaction between Hollywood, and if that's a way to gradually bring the public up to speed. And again, to get more accurate reporting of actually what people experience versus pushing it under the
It
rug.
can also be declared, this is all fictionalized though, too.
Yes. And it's easy. Yeah, you say it's all fictionalized. None of us feel threatened by a Steven Spielberg movie. I mean, E.T. was kind of cute, right? My mom loved that movie. But yeah, that's a good question. But the X-Files, yeah, I've often wondered because I know someone that worked at DIA, and he said, it was amazing how close those shows were to actual real incidents that we knew about, okay? And if you read Lukatsky's book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, he talks about these strange effects of UFO sightings that I didn't even know about, even myself, until going, talking to people and reading Lukatsky about the things, they call it the hitchhiker effect. I'm just bring up in one more subject here. That somehow when you experience one of these phenomena, it follows you home. I'm not trying to scare you with this or even say I necessarily believe in it. There could be a quantum explanation of frequencies of why. But it's all about why people that went to investigate Skinwalker Ranch in Utah come back to DC, and analysts at DIA, and start experiencing cryptids in their backyard.
oh wow.
The dogman type, not Bigfoot, the dogman type, and even the friends of the kids. These people were not talking about it because it's a classified program. The friends of their kids were seeing them in their backyards all of a sudden, like a contagion effect. Well, that's how Lukatsky puts it. So it wouldn't be surprising that Chris Carter, is that the producer? Yeah, maybe he had talked to people the way I do and other people do. These conferences are open to the public. You can go to these, and got some of these ideas from really talking to people that said, hey, Chris, you want to hear, hitchhiker effect, or even the chain smoking guy that was in it. That I was told by a very well-known remote viewer that there was a meeting over at the Pentagon one day. And the question was, do we keep the remote viewing program going another year or do we cancel it? And he said, this was some top guy at the Pentagon, and he said to the room, how many people want to cancel the RV program? And this was not popular. The RV program, they thought it was this witchcraft, like demonic. In the Pentagon, you can imagine, they don't want people with this intuitive psychic. He said, all the hands went up to cancel the program. This person said he was at the meeting, and there was a chain-smoking guy in a military uniform that no one knew who they were, or even what branch of military. And all he said, he took the cigarette out and I said, the program stays. And I was told the hands dropped like flies, and the person in charge, okay, the program stays. This top 5-star general said, the program stays. Whoever so there even was this chain-smoking dude.
Right.
And I only watched the show a few times, and I was told that chain-smoking dude really showed up.
Right.
And no one ever had a clue who they were, where they're from, but they were able to intimidate 5-star generals. So anyway, Mar, thanks for the question. That's my
Incredible.
comment.